Let me read to you a passage from the 18th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 35 to 43. It's the Gospel for Monday of the 33rd week in Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, "As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard the crowd was going by, he asked what was happening. They told him, 'Jesus of Nazareth is passing by.' He called out, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. When he came near, Jesus asked him, 'What do you want me to do for you?' 'Lord, I want to see,' he replied. Jesus said to him, 'Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you.' Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God." That's from Luke chapter 18, verse 35 to 43, reminding us of the prayer of petition. What do I mean? Well, for believer and non-believer alike, the world presents an almost intractable problem. It is the problem of suffering and evil. It tests the faith of the believer, and it deepens his faith if the test is passed. It is also the trump card of the non-believer, especially if he is militant about his atheism, his agnosticism, or his skepticism. As one self-professed atheist and professional philosopher, Peter Singer, has said, "If there were a God, he would have done a better job of things." Man suffers during life, and often terribly so. He cries out for mercy, compassion, and aid. You know, one of the distinguishing things about man, as against the animal, is that he can laugh. An animal cannot, properly speaking, laugh. But perhaps one can say that more often man weeps. Christ wept at the death of Lazarus, his friend. John chapter 11, verse 35. He wept over Jerusalem. Luke chapter 19, verse 41. To say the very least, the world is a sad puzzle. It is profoundly flawed, and man especially so. His heart aches under the burden of his sufferings, and the whole world groans with him. So it is that we may look on our gospel scene that I read earlier as a snapshot of creation, and in particular of man. Over the heads of the crowd there is heard a sound of great pathos. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Luke chapter 18, verse 35 to 43. This sound of man through the ages is heard over the multitudes, age after age, from the beginning till now, and it ever will be heard till the end. From his helplessness, man cries out to his gods, and when the true and living God makes himself known to those chosen by him as the helper of man in distress, man continues to cry out to him for help. Our blind man sitting by the roadside of Jericho is a worthy representative of this fallen, broken man. He hears that Jesus is passing by. He calls out for mercy, and due to his prayer, he gains it. Now, let us notice and reflect on one thing. As our Lord said, his prayer of faith saved him. What would have happened had he not appealed to Jesus for mercy? It is to be presumed that Christ would have passed him by. The man would have remained in his blindness it is to be supposed, for the rest of his life. As Jesus said to him, "Your faith has saved you." That is to say, it was the blind man's initiative in praying for help, born of his faith, that occasioned Christ's act of mercy. This point is well worth pondering. While it was Jesus who did the healing, and God as creator who was the ultimate author of the blind man's initiative in asking for mercy, in a real sense it depended on the blind man's resolve to appeal. There may have been other blind men in Jericho and its vicinity, but there is no report of their cure. In fact, generally our Lord responded to the needs that were presented to him. He calmed the raging storm because his terrified disciples woke him to their plight. While there were many cases of his miraculous action without a formal request, generally in such cases the human need was before him. It was placed there by somebody, or placed there by the course of events. There seems to be a pattern in our Lord's deliverance of persons from their distress. The distress was brought to his attention by a formal petition, or it was brought to his attention by some other means. He was not formally asked to raise to life the dead young man of the village of Nain, but by a concurrence of events, the dead young man was brought before him, together with his grieving widowed mother. Our Lord did not indiscriminately relieve persons of sorrows that were never brought before him by any means. Speaking broadly, and allowing for plenty of notable exceptions, the general pattern seems to be that God intervenes as the deliverer of man as a result of suffering being brought before him, whether by explicit formal petition or by some other means. God then wants us to pray for our needs and for the needs of our fellow man. Generally speaking, the bringing of needs before God seems to be part of the divine plan of God's answer to the problem of evil. When the paralytic was lowered from the roof and placed before him, Jesus saw their faith, both the faith of the paralytic and the faith of his friends, and proceeded to forgive his sins and cure him of his paralysis. The paralytic would not have received this double blessing had his need not been brought before the Redeemer. The very redemption of man from his sins was the result of the great sacrificial and priestly prayer on Calvary of man's champion, Jesus Christ, whom the Father had sent. Christ the victim and priest was our petitioner, and his prayer was heard. What is the answer to the problem of evil and suffering, which, though the atheist does not understand it, at root springs from man's sin, both original and personal? A most important part of the answer is to bring the needs of the world before the Father of all mercies. There has to be an unremitting ocean of prayer for mercy arising from the hearts of mankind to the Father of all blessings. That is clearly according to the divine plan. This prayer should be united with that of Christ, our great high priest, who continually intercedes for us at the right hand of the Father. This prayer of our intercessor is one with his all-effective sacrifice on Calvary, that one sacrifice which is made present at Mass, in the Eucharist, on our altars. By this all-powerful intercession of the head with his body, the Church, the world is sustained and can flourish. let intercession abound in us then.